Good afternoon, and thank you all for tuning in today. This is Lisa Harris with Enduring Fitness for You, and I am excited this afternoon to present my webinar, Rebuild Your Brain with Exercise. In this talk, we will review some of the normal changes in our brains as we age, and then we'll look at some of the exciting new research on how exercise can help support the aging brain. This will be a 45-minute webinar, but first I want to go through a couple of housekeeping guidelines. You're all on mute, so I can't hear you, nobody can hear you, and you cannot ask any questions at this time. So if you do have any questions, please write them down. You should be seeing a picture of me and the beginning of my slideshow, Rebuild Your Brain with Exercise. I am recording this call, and when we're done, we'll have a chance to send it to you later on this afternoon, and then you can listen to it whenever you have time. So if you have any questions, please write them down. When the webinar is over, I will stop the recording and I'll stay on the line in case you have any questions. So we'll have a short Q&A session. And again, I will email you a link to the recording after we're done. If you would like a copy of the outline for today's talk, please send me an email and request them at lisa@enduringfitnessforyou.com. That's Lisa, Lisa, at enduringfitness, ENDURINGFITNESS, the number 4, the letter U.com. Again, thank you for joining today, and my goal is to provide lots of valuable information so that you have a few good tips to take away and immediately use in your daily lives. So today we're going to cover a few things. First of all, why you have more control in the aging process than you think. So let me ask you this question. How many of you believe that losing your memory and getting dementia, maybe even Alzheimer's, is a normal part of aging? Well, it's not. And I'm wondering also if some of you maybe have relatives or friends who have Alzheimer's, and you're afraid of getting, going that direction yourself. In fact, developing Alzheimer's is one of the number one fears of baby boomers throughout the world. So we will discuss why you have more control over the aging process, specifically how it relates to your brain. We'll look at normal changes in the brain that occur with aging, and then we have to get that background out of the way first before it'll make sense what exercise can do to help support the brain. And then again, I want to leave you with some specific strategies to help protect your brain. So let's talk a little bit about the brain. It is one of the largest and most complex organs in our bodies. Most people don't think about it as an organ that makes energy, that needs to have nutrition going up to it, that creates wastes need to be taken away. We really do just take it for granted. It just works. We've got the brain cells, and we don't even give it a thought until we start losing our ability to have a good cognition and think and remember and do some planning and whatnot. There are literally billions of cells in the brain, and these nerve cells are called neurons, and this is where all of the activity happens. We have communication between these cells. So there are literally trillions of synapses or connections between the brain cells. And so the more you do something, the stronger the connections become. That's why if you're learning a new task, becomes easier with time because you start developing stronger connections in those synapses, in those connections between the brain cells. Under most conditions, under normal conditions, the brain uses blood sugar or glucose as its preferred supply of fuel or energy. In fact, at rest, the brain uses about 60% or more than half of all the glucose that is circulating in the body. This is why it's so important that you have carbohydrates in your diet. And this is not the talk on carbohydrates, but let me just say whole grains and complex carbohydrates are the preferred type that are beneficial. We have a transportation system in our body, that's our blood system, our bloodstream, and oxygen and nutrients are delivered to the brain via the blood system. And then on the opposite end of that, we have waste products that are actually produced in the brain, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Waste products are removed again through the blood system. And the brain uses about 20% of the body's blood supply. So it's really important that we keep all that blood moving very successfully throughout the brain. So I want to talk a little bit about some normal changes that occur in the brain. Now, some of these do result in a little bit of a loss in function. We know, for example, that the volume of the brain shrinks, that actually our brains get smaller with age. The important part to realize in that is that it is especially in the areas where we have learning and complex mental activities. So, for example, learning new activities, memory, being able to make judgments. Those are all important areas where we do know that we have less volume in the brain. We know that those precious brain cells start to decay. We actually get less of them. Scientists used to believe that you were born with a finite number of brain cells, and from the time you were a baby till the time you died, the brain cells just started decaying and dying off. We know that is not true, and I will talk a little bit more about that, because you really can rebuild those brain cells. But normal activity is that they do die with aging. In addition to the number of brain cells going down, the connections or communication between the brain cells also decreases. So if you will remember what I just mentioned, that your ability to learn new tasks is possible because of these synapses or these connections between your brain cells, then if these connections are going down, then obviously we have less of an ability to learn new things as we get older. We also know that the blood flow to the brain is decreased over time. Again, this is important because this is our transportation system. So if you have less blood going to the brain, you have less oxygen going to the brain, you have less nutrients going to the brain to make energy. And then also you could have possibly a buildup of waste products, which again, I'll talk more about in a few minutes, in the brain, because we don't have the blood system there to shunt them out of that area. And possibly inflammation is going to happen in the brain as we get older. And inflammation is a key process in many chronic diseases, as well as diseases of the brain and cognition. And we will talk about that also later on in this presentation. So there are a lot of normal things that do happen to the brain as we age. And so if you have problems remembering certain types of information, that is perfectly normal. So here are some common changes that people might notice as they get older, and the NIA is the National Institute on Aging. So, for example, we know that people have mild forgetfulness. It's not uncommon to forget somebody's name, to forget where you laid your keys. In my case, I think that my water bottle, my sunglasses, and my cell phone all need to be attached to me by an umbilical cord or something, because I'm forever putting them someplace and just not paying attention to where I left them. So mild forgetfulness, perfectly normal. Increased difficulty finding words and recalling names. And I'm sure that everybody does have problems with this that they've noticed. Even younger people have problems with this. But as you get older, you might have more of a problem. Just, that certain word that you're trying to do in the middle of a sentence just gets stuck on the end of your tip of your tongue, and you just can't spit it out. Or you've got somebody's name and you don't think of it until 20 minutes after you ran into them again. We also have more problems with multitasking. Now, having said that, I need to say also that most multitasking is a myth. Our brains cannot actually work on two tasks at the same time unless one of them is something that is automatic, like walking. You can walk and you can talk, or you can breathe and you can exercise. But to think that we can go back and forth between working a crossword puzzle and trying to watch a TV show, that just doesn't happen. Our brain actually toggles back and forth between tasks. We don't do two at the same time. That toggling back and forth, however, does become more difficult as we age. Also, we have mild decreases in being able to pay attention to anything. So I myself notice that sometimes when somebody is explaining something to me, I might have problems. I'm just chalking it up to the fact that I'm maybe thinking of something else. But this problem with paying attention is also something that we're looking at. So then let's look at what's not a normal part of aging. Again, what I just went through was what everybody goes through as they age. So dementia is a term that is a decline in mental ability severe enough to interfere with daily life. So again, the key part of that is that it's severe enough to interfere with your being able to do what you normally do during the day. So we have problems thinking, remembering, learning, and reasoning. As a result, dementia can lead to a loss of independence and then an increase in financial and emotional burden to yourself or to others. And I know that in our area, I live in Southern California, and we are seeing a lot of memory care facilities opening up in our area. So the people in the healthcare industry know that as the baby boomers age and as our parents are aging, and if we're not taking care of ourselves and our brains, that we will have more problems with dementia. And again, there is that cost. If you are not able to live independently or live with a family member and you have to be placed in a facility for special care, there is the financial burden that results from dementia. Now, Alzheimer's disease is, as I mentioned, probably one of the biggest fears that baby boomers have. I know that some of you might have a relative that has Alzheimer's disease. You may be a caretaker for somebody or caregiver, or you might have a friend whose father has died from the disease. We've been lucky in my family not to have any problems with Alzheimer's, but I do know several people who are taking care of their parents, and it is a huge financial, it's a huge emotional burden. And by burden, I don't mean something that people aren't willing to take on. It's just a very emotional time to have to watch somebody suffer with Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's is a disease of the brain, and we don't know exactly what causes it. We don't know how to cure it. There is no cure at this time. It is the most common dementia in people over age 65. And the biggest risk factor for dementia is your age. So the percentage of people over age 65 goes up dramatically. One of the things I want to talk about is the differences between normal problems that people have when they are aging versus problems that you see with dementia or Alzheimer's. So, for example, it is normal to not be able to remember the details of a conversation or event that took place a year ago. However, not being able to recall events of recent conversations or recent things that have happened is more a sign of a dementia or Alzheimer's. Not being able to remember the name of an acquaintance, a friend, a family member is normal with aging. Not recognizing or knowing the names of family members. I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. So the family members is more of a sign with dementia or Alzheimer's. Forgetting events and things occasionally, normal aging. Forgetting things and events more frequently, more of a sign of dementia. Occasionally having difficulty with words would be normal. Frequent pauses and substitutions when finding words, more of a sign of dementia. And this is an interesting one. Again, this information is from the National Institutes on Aging. You are worried about your memory, but your relatives are not. That is normal. However, if your relatives are worried about your memory and you are not aware of any problems, this is more of a cause to think that it might be a problem with dementia or Alzheimer's. 1 in 9 Americans over the age of 65 has Alzheimer's disease. 1 in every 3 seniors dies in this country with signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. So it's a very prevalent disease. It is expected to rise tremendously by the year 2050. Part of the problem is that baby boomers are aging, and there are some studies showing that we're not taking care of ourselves as well as our parents did at the same age. And some researchers are calling it the silver tsunami. It is this large cohort of people that if we don't take care of ourselves, we are going to bankrupt the healthcare system. And that's why all of these memory care places are going up. So it is a huge, huge problem in this country as well as worldwide. About 2/3 of Americans that have Alzheimer's are women. So it is much more frequently seen in women than men. And every 68 seconds in this country, someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Now, a couple things I need to mention. So that's kind of the bad news. It's a very scary thing, and it's a terrible thing to watch a loved one suffer and die from. Again, no known cause specifically, no known cure specifically. Researchers do know that there is a specific gene that if you have it, you will develop Alzheimer's disease. But that is the case in less than 5% of all people that have Alzheimer's. So what that means then, on the bright side, is that if you look at specific lifestyle choices, that these are things that we can actually modify to help decrease our possibilities of getting Alzheimer's and dementias. So specifically regards to Alzheimer's, there are certain things called comorbidities. So a morbidity is an illness. So a lot of the research is showing that people who have Alzheimer's disease also have diabetes, specifically type 2 diabetes, also have heart disease, in addition, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and extra weight. So any lifestyle changes that can be made to help decrease any of those comorbidities is going to be very important in helping to sway your chances of not developing dementia or Alzheimer's over time. What I want to talk about next is some of the theories of aging and chronic diseases. And again, this is important before we understand how exercise helps to support our brains as we get older. So, I had mentioned that we do produce a lot of energy and waste products in our brains. There's a lot of activity that goes on there, so there's a lot of waste products that are made. So, when we break down foods to make energy, we create the waste throughout the bodies and we create something called free radicals. Now, for baby boomers, when I think of free radicals, I kind of think of people in the 60s that would go to the colleges and cause problem. It's not that kind of a free radical. These are molecules that kind of break loose and bounce around in the body. Similar, I think of like a pinball machine. You've got that little ball bouncing around, and the free radicals can become very unstable and destructive. Now, the free radicals and the production of them is a normal response to an attack on the body or a breaking down of energy, as we mentioned before. Free radicals can lead to inflammation, and inflammation is what happens if you cut your finger or you've got foreign body coming into the body. The normal reaction is an inflammation. The problem is that these inflammations can become chronic. Now, the free radicals can be scooped up in the body and escorted out of the body by other molecules called antioxidants. Our bodies naturally produce these antioxidants that can help to keep the free radicals from getting too bad and the chronic inflammation from getting out of control. The problem with chronic inflammation is that it can lead to a chain reaction that damages cells, protein, and DNA. So specifically, free radicals and chronic inflammation can cause cells to mutate, leading to cancer, cells plaque to burst, leading to cardiovascular or heart disease, heart attacks, or strokes, insulin to be used less efficiently, leading to diabetes. And again, with most adults, that would be type 2 diabetes. And brain cells to become damaged, possibly leading to Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. So we know that part of the chronic disease process is important with aging because we are less able to withstand some of the stresses of life as we grow older. So there's more of a problem with the free radicals, so chronic inflammation and chronic diseases. Now, many of these chronic diseases, the diabetes, the cardiovascular disease, are also part of the comorbidities that we saw earlier with Alzheimer's disease. So that's the connection here. The brain is very active, produces a lot of energy. We have the waste products of energy. We've got then the free radicals, can lead to chronic inflammation, can lead to chronic diseases. And here we are with then the brain problems. So before I get into exercise and the brain, I want to give you a quick side note on some other things that you can do to help support the aging brain. I don't want to leave this topic without giving you some additional information because these other lifestyle choices are just important as exercise. So I've come up with the acronym FOSSE, and it's not the choreographer from a few decades ago, but it stands, each letter stands for something. So I want to just quickly go through those. The first letter, F, stands for fruits and vegetables. So we know that a plant-based diet high in fruits and vegetables has many antioxidants, many anti-inflammatories that are very beneficial for chronic diseases, specifically the brain. There have been about 2 or 3 diets that have been looked for that are helpful in continuing to have brain function into older age. One of them is the DASH diet, which was developed for hypertension or blood pressure. One is the Mediterranean diet, which you're probably aware of, which is high in fruits and vegetables, fish, healthy oils. And another one is the MIND diet, which is a combination of the other two diets. So basically, a diet high in fruits and vegetables with 5 to 11 servings of fruits and vegetables per day is key for keeping the brain healthy. Everything from berries and apples to green leafy vegetables to orange vegetables, yellow vegetables, you name it. Eat the rainbow, fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables, every meal, snacks, get them all in. Fresh, frozen, or canned. If you do get canned, try to get the ones with the lowest salt or sodium amount. The O stands for obesity. So being obese doubles your risk of developing dementia. And it seems that the fat cells do release inflammatory agents. So trying to keep your weight under control is going to also help with your brain, supporting your brain. Now, what the researchers have found is that you don't have to lose a lot of weight. A decrease in 5 to 7% of your body weight can really help in staving off some of the chronic diseases. So again, that's not going to be a huge amount. You just take some of that weight off and keep it off. Sugar. So sugar is extremely important with chronic diseases. And we know that diets that are higher in sugar have a tendency to develop specifically chronic inflammation. So you want to try to avoid sugar as much as possible. Added sugar, as far as adding teaspoons of sugar, and in addition, look on the ingredients of products. There are probably 24 names for the ingredient sugar. Everything from high fructose corn syrup to cane sugar. Molasses. I mean, there's lots and lots of things. So you want to just try to keep your intake down on high sugar foods, the main ones being high sugar drinks such as sodas, but everything from ice cream, candies, cookies, cupcakes, sugar is in cereals. Just start reading labels and go for the foods that have the very lowest amount. The S stands for sleep. And we know that during sleep, this is when our cells repair themselves, and specifically brain cell repair does take place. So you want to do everything you can to get the best night's sleep, 7 to 8 hours. And that is not necessarily what that's not this talk today. Something that has interested me for probably the last 10 years, because I have become somebody that does not get a good night's sleep on a consistent basis, but it is very important for our brains. All right, so then finally, exercise. E stands for exercise. So I want to talk then the next 10 to 15 minutes about what exercise does to help our brains, and then share with you some of the research that's been done as to the best type of exercises to do to support your brain. And there's my little brain pushing up a nice little barbell there. So we have known for decades, we have known since the 70s when I was in college, that exercise does a lot of positive things. I remember a lot about the runner's high, a lot of talk about endorphins, about some of the early research that was going on with how exercise was improving the mood of people, making you very happy. It also helps with sleep and memory, helps to relieve stress, depression, and anxiety. And there have been several studies that have looked specifically at how exercise does benefit us. There's a couple of studies that I want to talk really briefly about that were done, was published within the last year. One of them took a group of seniors and had them exercise, and the result of this study was that even small amounts of what's called moderate to vigorous physical activity, 28 minutes per day, was significantly associated with an improvement of cognitive performance. So the general recommendation in this country for everybody is 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous physical activity. That type of activity is brisk walking, bicycle riding, dancing, gardening, housework, just getting out and moving. And so this study, though, did say as little as 28 minutes per day is very helpful. And there was another study that showed that people who were able to get some high intensity training in had very beneficial effects to the genes in related to their bodies. The genes were actually more youthful with people that were able to get the exercise. The high intensity exercise is simply doing exercise that is as walking stairs, getting the heart rate up, or walking as fast as you can for several minutes and then slowing down and walking or going down the stairs at a lower, getting your heart rate down and going back and forth between those intervals. Exercise is beneficial for our brains because it's a way to target some of those modifiable risk factors or comorbidities. We know that people who exercise have less of a chance of developing obesity, have less of a chance of developing high blood pressure, cancer, diabetes, heart disease. It specifically reduces the risk of dying from coronary artery disease and developing high blood pressure. It can help with people that have high blood pressure. It can help to reduce their blood pressure. It can help with chronic disabling conditions, therefore improving stamina and muscle strength, and reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression. And then again, helping with those with the elevation of moods. We have with exercise an increase in blood flow, getting oxygen and nutrients in, getting the waste out, improved insulin utilization, and reduced inflammation. I mentioned earlier that scientists and doctors used to believe that we were born with a specific number of brain cells and that they just started dying off as life went on, and we were not able to recapture or get any more of these. Now they know that our brains have something called neuroplasticity, and this is the ability to reshape, remake itself by actually getting new brain cells, new connections, and new blood vessels in the brain. So this is a very exciting bit of research that's going on throughout the world right now, because we now know that there are things that we can do nutrition wise and exercise wise where we can actually reshape the structure of the brain to help us adapt more to new challenges and new tasks as we get older. Now, specifically, what some of this research is showing is that in animal studies, we know that exercise increases both the number of small blood vessels that supply blood to the brain and the number of connections between blood cells. So again, if you can get more blood in and you get more of those synapses going, you have more of a chance of maintaining your cognitive function. Also, exercise raises the level of certain proteins in the brain that are important for memory and learning. Research in humans has shown that exercise can stimulate the brain's ability to maintain the old network connections. So one of the things I mentioned that was a normal process of aging was that the connection, those synapses between the brains tend to decay and die off with age. So we know that we can maintain those old connections and make new ones with exercise. And there was a study, that another one that was published recently, where they looked at seniors that exercise for 40 minutes a day or they had another group that was doing stretching or toning exercises. And what they found was the group that was doing walking had improved connectivity in the part of the brain that had to do with those higher levels of cognition. So this was a really important study showing that as little as, 40 minutes a day of walking is not little, but I mean, it's not, again, we're not talking about strenuous exercise to help to restructure the brain. People who exercise consistently, have about half the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia as compared to people who don't. Some researchers actually believe that exercise is the number one modifiable risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease. So I had mentioned some of the proteins that are developed through exercise. So the exercise does produce in our brains specific proteins and hormones that protect the brain from some of the ravages of aging. One of the most important ones that's been discovered is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and we'll just go with BDNF here. Some people are calling this miracle grow for your brain because this is what is actually helping to spur the growth of new brain cells and new connections. The specific types of exercise that the researchers are looking at that help to spur this production of BDNF are mainly cardio or aerobic type exercises. So I mentioned that one study where they had people walking for 40 minutes a day. There's a good example of cardio, or again, aerobic exercise. But what seems to be the best type of exercise is some kind of cardio that also presents a mental challenge to your brain. So some of the examples of this would be doing something aerobic with something more complex. So for example, if you are walking with a friend of yours and you're maybe reciting something in a foreign language, if you know a foreign language, or you're doing the alphabet backwards, or you're, excuse me, maybe doing some math problems or something. Some other things would be using exercises with complex motor skills. Racquetball, rock climbing would be another idea. Even hiking, where you have to watch where you're walking. In other words, your brain is engaged. You're not just walking along. Those also will work. And then something as easy as changing out your routine. So let's say, for example, every morning you get up and you stretch and then you go for a walk. Maybe you could change it up and go for a walk and then stretch. Or if you go to the gym or you do some strength building exercises at home, you could change up the order that you do them, or you could do more repetitions. You could increase the amount of weight that you're pushing or pulling, and that will help to keep your brain healthy. So what I do, I teach an exercise class for older adults. And what I do to try to get the BDNF going is I have somebody throw out at the beginning of the class a 4-digit number. And then we all memorize that number. And I have them say it forward, I have them say it backward. We recite it several times. And then throughout the hour, I will ask them, what is our number forward? What is our number backward? So we're getting the exercise in, and then we're also getting that brain challenge in. There is some newer research showing that resistance training or weight training is also important for the development of BDNF, or possibly some of the other proteins or brain hormones that are important to help support the brain. So this is the suggestion right now, is to do the cardio. Again, if you can get in 20, 30 minutes of walking a day, and that does not have to be Altogether, you could do 10 minutes 3 times a day with some kind of a mental challenge. You could, some other ideas for that would be walking on a sidewalk if you're able to do that, walking upstairs, all of those things will work. And also trying to get a couple of days of resistance training in every week. So, in summary, there are normal changes that happen to the brain in the brain as we grow older, and that these all do lead to a loss in function. Some of the more critical changes and more upsetting changes that happen in the brain are not a normal part of aging. They are related to lifestyle choices such as sleep, what you eat, and also exercise. The comorbidities that are really important to look at with Alzheimer's include cardiovascular or heart disease, high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol, and diabetes, also being overweight. I had mentioned the FOSSI, fruits and vegetables, watching your weight, obesity, sugar, sleep, and exercise. Specifically with exercise, we know now that exercise can change the actual structure of the brain, increasing blood flow to the brain, increasing the number and maintaining the number of connections, and allowing new brain cells to be developed. The best type of exercise is some kind of a cardio with a mental challenge. And also, it is important to make sure that you have a good strength training program. And that can be something as little as picking up a couple of cans of green beans and walking around your house with them and trying to increase the weight of those the weight of your that you're carrying throughout the time. So at this point, that is the end of the webinar, and I am going to stop the recording and give everybody a chance to ask questions if they have any. So hold on just a minute, please.